Okay, so we'll get started here. So if I could ask Anna and Rachel to unmute themselves and to turn their cameras on, and then we can get started with your part of the presentation.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. I am a U of T medical student. I'm in my 3rd out of 4 years right now. And with me will be Anna. She's also from U of T. I'm not seeing her face right now, but she is on here. And she's also a 3rd year. We're both in our family medicine rotation. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means if you want. But for now, we'll start with before medical school, what you want to do, how you figure out if you want to go to med school, and what you have to do to try and get into med school.
Hi, everyone. Like Rachel said, my name is Anna. I'm a 3rd year medical student and happy to be here to talk with all of you today. So to start us off, what is medical school? In Canada, that's the degree that you do to become a doctor. We call it an MD degree here. And usually this starts after doing an undergraduate degree in something. So it could be, in any sort of discipline that you're interested in. But then after that, you would sort of progress on to doing the medical degree, and that gives you the training to be any number of different kinds of doctors.
Okay, so how long is it to become a doctor? It is a long time if you're in Canada or the US. So first you have to finish high school. Once you finish high school, you need to get a university degree. And depending on what specialty or what you're interested in, it can be 3 to 4 years. And after you get your university degree, then you can apply to medical school in the US or Canada. And medical school, depending on which school you go to, is 3 to 4 years long. After you graduate medical school, you have to train as a resident, and we have residents here that can talk to you about what that entails. So that's basically a doctor in training before you can become a full-fledged independent physician. So a lot of time.
And just to give everyone a quick breakdown of what Rachel and I will be going through, we're quickly going to touch on how to make the choice to go into medicine, and what you need to do to prep for that. So what kinds of courses you need to be taking, what marks you need to be getting, and other aspects of the application process.
All right, so is medical school the right choice for me? That's a very good question, and it's very hard to answer. I didn't really have an answer to that question until I was in the end of my 3rd year in university. So you don't need to have an answer right now. Just make sure that you try to explore different things and find out what you like and what you don't like. And it's never too late to pursue medicine. You don't have to go to medicine right after university. You can work for a few years, take a dip in something that you're interested in, and then see if you want to pursue medicine. There's no rush.
And then in terms of what courses you need to take, so here we're talking more specifically about what's university level courses, but I guess since we're talking to a high school crowd, when you're looking at different undergrad programs you're applying to, you sort of go through their list of requirements of what they might need. So this might be things like bio, chem, calculus, stuff like that. Those are pretty common for maybe a life science undergrad program. And then moving on to what we're looking at in terms of university requirements. The biggest piece of advice I would have here is every medical school has a different list of what exactly they want you to take during your undergrad. Some schools have no specific prerequisites at all. And then other ones have like very long lists about what they need. So my advice to all of you is, if this is something you are thinking about, to actually go through all the individual program websites. That's often the most up-to-date source of information on what courses exactly you will need to take. Common ones being common are often, biochem, life sciences courses, maybe some physics in there as well. But definitely check out each program and see what their exact requirements are.
Yeah, and I would definitely do it early in your university years, so that you can get it over with and not have to scramble in your 3rd or 4th year when you want to apply but don't have the courses needed to apply. Okay, so in terms of grades, yes, you do need a good grade to get into medicine. Specifically, how much is hard to say, but I would say you would need an average like around 80% or 75, 80% at least. And if you do fail a course, it's not the end of the world. There are people, I've had colleagues in medical school who have failed courses in their university degree. There are lots of ways to rescue that. And there are some schools when you apply that allows you to drop one bad year in your university year. So if you had 1 year where you had just didn't work very well for you, had really low grades, some universities when you apply, they don't take that into account when they calculate your grades. So don't give up hope if you didn't do well in one of your courses or even a couple of your courses. Just if you are really interested in medicine, still continue to try. And medical schools don't only look at grades. There are other things that they look at. So grade is one of them. There's also extracurriculars. There's employment for those who do work on the side. There's volunteering, and of course, the famous MCAT score. There are a number of medical schools that will look at either all of your MCAT scores or at least one of your MCAT score. And all of the medical schools are different. So look at what you're interested in, go to their website and learn about what they look at so that you can tailor your application and your extracurriculars to that school.
So Rachel just quickly touched on the MCAT just now. So for those of you who haven't heard of it, I believe it stands for the Medical College Admission Test. So this is a standardized exam that looks at basic science, reasoning, and reading comprehension skills. So in terms of basic science, that would be things like biology, chemistry, physics, stuff like that. It's people usually write it in the summer after second or third year, though I will say that's they put a big asterisk on the end of that. Lots of people write it at different times. I know lots of people that have had to rewrite it as well in order to get a better score. And as Rachel touched on, not every medical school treats it the same way. So some schools will only look at one component of the score. Some schools might implement more of a cutoff system, or more of a threshold system. So if you're above a certain score, they actually don't really factor it that much into decision making afterwards. They sort of use it as if you're above like this X value, then you're automatically considered.
All right, so money is very important in medical school. As you may have heard, all medical students, when they graduate, are very much in debt. So it does cost quite a bit to go to medical school, depending on which school you go to. I guess, yeah, the tuition is different. McMaster, take a look there. It is the highest per year in tuition, but it is a 3-year program. So total tuition would be less compared to all the other schools. If that is what you're thinking, then if tuition is an important factor for you, then McMaster probably is what you would choose. But again, you should also consider things like living costs, any extra money that you want to spend, have fun, have a life during medical school. Right now, I would say get through university first. Once you get through university, you'll have a better idea in terms of financial planning and what kind of finances are okay for your spending level.
And then we saw some pretty big numbers on that previous slide there. So the one thing I will add is just that there's a lot of funding opportunities through things like government funding. So things like OSAP, and as well, most of the major banks in Canada offer pretty good lines of credit to medical students. So not to say that this is something that anyone on this call has to worry too much about right now, but just know there are supports available to help med students through affording their education.
All right, so during medical school, what happens? So during medical school, it's almost kind of like university or not that much change. So you have class, and the class, depending on where you are, generally consists of some group work. There are lectures, there's going to be some labs like anatomy labs. But on the side, you do have time in medical school for extracurriculars, for things that you're interested in. You'll have time for volunteering. You're actually encouraged to volunteer. There will be probably a number of clubs in your medical school, whichever one you go to, that will organize these volunteering opportunities in your community. And of course, there's study time and free time, just based on how you organize. For U of T specifically, we have like a self-care day once in a while where we have no classes scheduled and it's used for however you want. So that's very nice. I find it. I get it to, you know, catch up on sleep, do things I'm interested in, or just catch up on procrastination. So don't worry about like not having free time in medical school. You will have free time.
And then in terms of like what our day-to-day looks like in medical school, so Rachel and I are both in a 4-year program. And in the first 2 years of that, most of our learning happens in the classroom. So much like high school or undergrad, we're sitting in lectures. There are like small group learning and labs added into all of that, as Rachel mentioned. And then a big change sort of comes at the second 2 years of the program, and that's a stage that Rachel and I are currently at. So we transition more to hospital-based learning. So to give everyone an example of what that might entail, right now Rachel and I are on our family medicine rotation here in Barrie. So that means we're matched up with family doctors and we actually are in the clinic with them. So we're seeing patients and we're learning around those cases, versus more so in the first 2 years when you're sort of studying off of lectures and textbooks and whatnot.
Yeah. For the first 2 years, you're basically a full-time student where you go into the classroom. And then for the second 2 years, you're working full-time. So you're not in a classroom, you're going to a clinic every day from 8 to 5 or whatever working hour it is for you, every single weekday, sometimes on weekends as well. And then you have to study outside of those working hours. Okay, so the statement is true. Med school is challenging, but also it is fun. You will have lots of opportunities for electives, for research if you're interested in it. Socials, leadership opportunities, and naps. Naps are my favorite thing in the world. Learn to take your naps when you have the opportunity. When you're in med school, you're going to need that skill in your 3rd and 4th year.
All right, and then after the 3 or 4 years, you're in a MD program. You have to move on to some extra training after that. That's what we call residency here in Canada. So that's something Rachel and I know very little about, but I think we have 3 really great family residents here on this call right now, and they're sort of going to talk through what that's like.
So just switching gears here. Hi, everyone. My name's Adrian. I'm one of the aforementioned residents. I don't know if, Britt, you needed to do any transition here, or do you want me to introduce all of us? Give her a... Yeah, she comes. Hang it up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce us. So like I said, my name's Adrian. I'm one of the chief residents here at Barrie. We also have Katie Bertram, and there you go. And Alice, I'm not sure if Alice is on with us yet. I think she was going to be a little bit late, but she'll be joining us in a little bit. So as Anna and Rachel were saying there, we're going to sort of take you through what residency looks like. There's a fair bit of overlap between our slides here, but I'll try and keep it as specific to residency as possible. So we can go to the next slide there. So this is what we'll sort of be talking about in the last few slides that we have here, and we're going to leave lots of time for questions as well. So we can go to the next one here. And please keep your questions coming. I'm seeing a lot of good ones there, and we're going to get to all of these at the end of this little talk that we have. So as they were saying, this is sort of the path of becoming a doctor. You do your undergrad, whether it's 3 or 4 years. You go to med school, which is another 3 or 4 years, depending on where you train. I think the only 3-year programs in Canada are McMaster and Calgary, if memory serves. And then you get to residency, which is where Katie and I are right now. So basically, when you're a resident, you've graduated medical school, you've passed the first part of your licensing exams, and you're officially a doctor. So that's why both Katie and I we have our MD degree at this point. The purpose of residency training is to allow you to be able to actually practice medicine as a physician independently. So in theory, you could finish medical school, decide you don't want to go to residency and still be a physician. You just wouldn't be allowed to prescribe medications and treat patients. And after residency, which sort of ranges from anywhere from 2 years, which is what we are here in family medicine, up to 6, 7, 8 years, depending on the specialty, then you're officially a doctor. We'll go to the next slide here. And I think this was touched on before. There are a lot of different ways of becoming a doctor. I would say that the majority of people end up doing something medicine-y or something science-y rather in their undergraduate career. So I was an undergrad in biochemistry and biomedical sciences, but as the slide showing here, we have people from all walks of life. So the one I always reference back to is in my wife's class, there was a 37-year-old that had a degree in music as an undergrad and didn't have any masters or anything else as far as I'm aware.
Excuse me, could you please turn up your mic, Dr. Adrian?
Yeah, let me see. Give me a quick second. I was having issues with that before. Is anyone else having a hard time hearing me?
Yeah, it's pretty muted.
Pretty quiet, eh? Okay, give me one quick sec, guys, because I know I had this problem before and I think I know how to fix it. Is it like really muted or is it just a little bit quiet?
A little bit quiet.
Just a little bit quiet. Okay, give me 2 seconds. Open sound setting here. I can also talk louder if I need to. Manage sound devices. No sounds. I think that's what I need. Yes, here we go. Sure, communication recording, microphone, properties, levels. That's fine. Is that better now? Can you guys hear me better? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, I don't know why my microphone keeps going to 1 or 2 there, so sorry about that. So just going back a slide there if we can. Yeah, so as I was saying, they're 37-year-old with a degree in music and no real science training beyond that. And as far as I know, they've gone on to be very successful in medical school and residency and probably a doctor now if the timeline matches up there. So just because, you know, most people go into science to go into medicine doesn't mean that you have to sort of pigeonhole yourself in that way. If you're really passionate about music, you're really passionate about English or history, you can certainly become a doctor. It makes the MCAT a little bit trickier because you don't have that background ongoing, but there's always selectives and electives that you can do during undergrad to sort of help you out there. We can go to the next slide here. So once you're in medicine, once you're done medical school, you have to decide what sort of residency you want to go into. So we have highlighted at the bottom there that we are all family doctors. The people that are talking to you here tonight are all family medicine residents. But there are a ton of other specialties that you can go into. You know, the common ones you'll see are the multiple different surgeries or emergency medicine. But there's also the less common ones that you won't think about, like you know, there's the ophthalmologist or the medical genetics. So there's a slice of medicine for everybody, and I'd encourage people to explore that before going into medicine to see what you might be interested in. So what is med school? So Anna and Rachel kind of touched on this already. Basically, it's either 3 or 4 years. The first half or the first 2 years, you're sort of doing, you know, in class work where you're getting the, you know, you're learning the physiology, learning the anatomy, learning the sort of core elements of it in a more didactic lecture type of way. And in clerkship is where you put it into everyone okay? Yeah, noise there. And clerkship is where you sort of put that into practice.
Can they hear us?
You're trying to get a hold of us, Annie?
You want me to know?
If anyone who's not speaking, could you just mute yourselves, please?
Oh, yeah.
Not sure if Annie's with us. Great. Might be able to mute.
Get the paper.
Let's see.
Have to try.
Is our camera off? Is our camera off?
I don't know.
Katie,
I do not know you.
let's see. Hey, Brett, are you? There we go. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So you do 2 years of clerkship. You're sort of doing what you would do as a resident, doing what you would be doing as a staff physician, just under the care or under the supervision of residents and doctors and fully fledged doctors. So we can go on to the next slide. Yeah, so what's med school like? I think Anna and Rachel sort of summarized this well. It is busy, it is challenging, but there is a lot of fun as well. I find the people that tend to go into medicine, you think of us as sort of a nerdy bunch, so to speak, but I think we have a lot of fun as well. It's all about balance, I think, in the end, and there's all those jokes about how all you do in medicine is study, and there is a portion of that, but you do certainly get to live your life outside of the textbooks. And yeah, reasons for choosing medicine, there are too many to sort of summarize here or go over here. But if you're the kind of person that likes working with other people, if you like using your brain and learning new things, because medicine is all about what we call lifelong learning. Because what you learn in medical school now may be obsolete, 2 to 10 years later. I know there's some things that we learned even just 4 years ago in medical school that have changed pretty drastically, and you need to be able to stay on top of that. So if you have a passion for learning and staying up to date on things, it's you might be the right person for medicine. Then what are the alternatives? So there are a lot of what we call allied healthcare professionals, or people that are not physicians but do the rest of the work of the healthcare system. We rely on these people every single day. The big ones that come to mind for myself, other than the nursing staff, of course, are the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, the speech language pathologists. Pretty much every day we're getting notes back and forth from pharmacists. So if you like medicine, but ultimately decide that you don't want to pursue medical school, then there are a ton of other options available to you. And I'd encourage people to sort of explore all sorts of these to see if medicine is truly for you, or if you want to do other things within the healthcare system. Yeah, so some of the myths, and again, Anna and Rachel sort of covered a lot of these. There's no direct path to medicine. There's no one way of getting in. Every single medical school looks at slightly different things. So for example, Western, where Katie and I trained, they're known for sort of caring a little bit more about the MCAT scores than some of the other features. Mac tends to care about a bunch of different things. I don't actually know what Mac cares about, to be completely honest. It's a bit of an enigma. But every school is going to be a little bit different. I always give it one example. I had a friend who didn't get a single interview in Ontario, but then ended up getting to the Yale Medical School on his first try. And he was a great student, but there's just one of those things. So you need to be persistent about it, and just all different kinds of ways of getting in. You don't need to have a perfect GPA. You need to have a good GPA, but that's certainly not everything. And as they were saying before, some schools take a cutoff approach where as long as you're above, GPA X, then they don't really care about it beyond that. And in terms of whether or not to volunteer in a hospital or doctor's office, I would say it's not necessary, but I would still recommend doing it so you get a sense of whether you want to commit to doing this for the rest of your life. I know I volunteered down at Mount Sinai for a bit, and that sort of opened my eyes to medicine as a possibility for me. We'll go to the next slide. And this is my last slide here, but where can you study medicine? So the majority of Canadian graduates end up studying within Canada, but it's not the only option. So a lot of people end up going overseas. So a lot of people go to Ireland is a very popular one. The Caribbean is another popular spot. And Australia are also very popular options. And you get very good training in these places. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, and some of them you can get into right after high school. But I would encourage people to explore all of these options, especially if you don't want to necessarily study in Canada, because that's not for everybody. On to the next one here. And I think Katie's up for this, I believe.
So hi everybody, just reintroducing myself, Katie here, PGY2, So the PGY just means postgraduate, so that we've completed medical school. I am also Barrie born. I went to Barrie North. So if there's anybody currently attending North right now, go Vikings. I wish I was in Barrie right now, but I'm actually up north in Kenora. So there was a question about, is there a need for doctors? Absolutely. I'm in a pretty remote community and they're always looking for people to come join and help basically help out the communities more north as well. Okay. So getting into a little bit more nitty gritty about application. So the first step is one, you just have to get an interview. And that's harder said than done. It's a mixture of looking at your grades, your MCAT scores. There's also something called the CASPER, and some medical schools look at this as well. It's more like ethical reasoning. So it's an exam in a way that you do online. It gives you maybe clinical scenarios or situational conflict resolution kind of skills, in the sense of looking at a conflict between a supervisor at work and an employee and kind of reasoning through a problem. It's a time test, kind of like the MCAT as well. I believe McMaster, I can't remember if Western, I don't think so. There's a few that are getting more and more on board with the CASPER as years go on. So just know it might not just be the MCAT. Other things that they look at on the admissions committee when they're giving candidates a slot for an interview is your extracurriculars, your work experience, basically knowing that you're human, right? What makes you you? And the other thing that they look at is reference letters. So just a few things we'll get into in a little bit more detail. All right, next slide. Perfect. The other part is once you get an interview, you have to succeed at it. And again, it seems easy, but it can be really difficult. It's very stress provoking. The more practice you have, the better you'll do. Even Adrian and I right now, we're still interviewing for jobs. We're still interviewing for more education because I think we just like learning too much. But once you're at the interview, practice makes perfect. They want to know, again, what makes you you? What are your extracurriculars? What's your work experience? Are you just genuine, right? Sell yourself as a human being. All right. So I know we already talked a little bit about grades. A lot of people really focus on grades and grade point averages when they're looking at applying to medical school. Your grades do matter. Everybody calculates a GPA slightly differently. For my undergrad, so after North, I went to Guelph for my master's and my undergrad. And so we still used a percent system. So it was like 80, 90%, 60%. Was your end grade, but for the OHMSA, which is your Ontario Medical School applications, they all have to be converted into GPAs. So every university will have their own algorithm of how to convert your grades. So if you go onto the OHMSA website, at least that's where it was when I was applying, they can help you convert into a grade point average. So McMaster is slightly different. I think they use like a 12-point scale or something like that in comparison. So just kind of look, they do matter, but every university is going to have a slightly different cutoff. The other thing is a lot of you guys are coming out of high school or thinking about what to do in university. My hands down best piece of advice is pick something you're interested in. As Adrian said, some people do music degrees, some people go into accounting, business, engineering, whatever you're going to enjoy. It's 4 years of your life or sometimes longer if you're going to have a co-op placement in it, that you want to be able to enjoy your time in university, because medical school and just getting through medicine in general, it's not a sprint, it's an endurance race. Okay. So if you pick things that you enjoy, it'll be good. The other thing is getting an excellent MCAT score. So again, some people take the MCAT once and they're great, they get a great score. Again, each school is looking for something different. Other people have to take it 2 or 3 times. The one thing I would mention when you're looking at the MCAT is practice tests is my key right there, because again, it's not just knowing the knowledge that they're going to be testing on the MCAT, it's getting your testing skills up to date in the sense of practicing your timing, right? If I don't know the answer to a question, am I going to sit and stew on it? Or am I going to be like, okay, I don't know it, I'm going to move on to the next one and try and pick up scores there. So a lot of it is knowledge based, but at the same time, it's a lot about test taking strategies too. And when we talk about reference letters, usually medical schools want 3. So one of them has to be an academic reference. So this is somebody either through your university days, high school, somebody that can really speak to your critical thinking skills. Because when you're in medicine, you're a problem solver. People are coming to you looking for solutions. So how can you think through a problem, and trying to find somebody that can really write towards that is a great idea. So it could be a professor in university that you've worked on a project with, somebody that you just went with for help, right, in a course or a seminar. The other reference letters can be anyone. So it could be somebody that can speak to your character. Again, what makes you you? So whether that be a coach, right, a boss, anybody that can speak to your human qualities is what I call it. Last but not least, your extracurriculars and volunteers. So again, pick something you're interested in. Never do something just because you think it's going to look good on a piece of paper or your resume. So when I was at Guelph, I really enjoyed working with kids. So I was a one-to-one support worker. So any of the city events that they ran, kids with disabilities could go to them, and I went with them to those activities and helped them throughout their things. So things that you are interested in, try and explore. The other thing about medicine is, the way I look at it is like, we are also almost a service industry. We are there to serve our communities.
Hello, how are you?
So by getting involved in the communities that you are living in can be really rewarding, but also build on your communication skills, right? Because when you're in a clinical environment, you are communicating with patients from all different backgrounds. And the more experience and the more kind of knowledge and different lenses that you can view problems from based on your extracurriculars and volunteerism, the better. And then there's research. So everybody often feels research. It can be a daunting aspect. They do look at it in your applications. It's not the end all to be all. Again, it's really looking at how can you pick a problem or a question and apply it, right? So that's what research is. So if you can get involved with some sort of research, whether it be in your university days or kind of on your own time, it looks great. Again, it's practicing different skill sets that can be really good for a career in medicine, but it's not, it doesn't have to be there. So for me, I didn't have any published papers or anything like that when I applied to medicine. I had a little bit of research just because of my undergrad that I did. It was a mandatory component, but it was nothing over the top by any means. All right, so just a couple good resources. The first one is OHMSA, so Ontario Medical School Application Service. That's also the website you can find that GPA calculator on. And then otherwise look at the university specific websites. So go on to Western, go on to McMaster, UBC. That's where Alice will be, who did her undergrad from in her medical school at. So you can look outside of province, in province, wherever you kind of are interested. And I think next up is Alice. Is she here with us?
I haven't seen her pop on yet.
No, Alice just messaged me. She's not able to jump on. Apparently there's a max of 100 participants, so we've hit 100. So it's gonna have the two of you.
Sounds good. So we can keep going. That's totally okay. Adrian, do you want me to go for a few and then?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. So NOSM is short for the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. And so the next kind of part of this is just going into those medical schools in a little bit more detail. NOSM is a 4-year undergrad program. So when we say undergrad, when you go through your medical school, you kind of repeat an undergrad. And that's why they say this is the undergrad. Adrian and I are now in our post-grad education. So it's another 4-year degree. Every year their GPA cutoffs will change. So just again, always check back to either their own website or that OHMSA. Usually there's a big spreadsheet that OHMSA puts out as well. So GPA is looking at a 3.0. For NOSM, your MCAT isn't required. The other thing they look at is your autobiographical sketch. So it's called your ABS. And that's when all of the universities just make you list all of your extracurricular activities that you've been in. If I remember correctly, I think it was like up until age 16. So even the things that you do in high school, the sports that you play, keep a document on that, kind of like a CV, because if you're going to apply to medical school, they become really important and you can put them on there. like I said, 3 reference letters, and then they also ask you some essay questions. So where you have to kind of answer their problem, or for example, some of the supplementary questions for NOSM was like, describe what does resilience mean to you in coping. And when you're answering these questions, if you're going through, it's always nice to add personal examples, because again, that's selling who you are as a person. And actually, when somebody on the other side of the table is reading them, it can help them better remember you as a candidate, which is really what you're wanting to do. The format for interviewing at these schools is a little bit different. Some of it's like a panel where you have 3 people sitting across from you and they just ask you questions. Others, like NOSM, is called multiple mini interviews, so MMI. And that's when you, sometimes depending on the school, like at U of T, it was a little bit of MMI based, where you went from door to door with different clinical scenarios, different questions, those sorts of things. The one thing about NOSM is that it's not a central university. They are both at Thunder Bay and Sudbury. And I think even, so I'm in Kenora, but there's also medical students from NOSM with me for over 8 months right here. So there's satellite hubs as well. And most of them are kind of all the way from Huntsville hubs to Kenora to Red Lake, Sioux Lookout. NOSM spans like all of Northern Ontario. So Adrian, do you want Western?
Yeah, I'll take it. Katie and I trained at a Western, so I'm glad I didn't have to fight her for this. So Western obviously is four-year program, as I mentioned, other than Calgary and MAC, all the other programs are 4 years. We used a minimum GPA to get in of 3.7. I don't recall off the top of my head whether, I think higher probably helps you more, but you needed at least that minimum. Now the MCAT, I can't honestly talk to you about the new one. So they changed over right when Katie and I were getting in. They changed from an old system to a new system. So that 380 actually doesn't mean much to me. Maybe Anna and Rachel might be able to chat on about that later. But I don't think it really matters for you guys at this point. I'll be completely honest, when I was at your stage, even grade 12 going into undergrad, I had no idea about any of this stuff. So the fact that you guys are even here now means you're miles ahead of where I even was. So there were no prerequisite courses. Again, this is going back a while, so sort of the memory on these things is a little bit foggy, and things can change from year to year. But I think they wanted a mix of sort of the biological and humanities, and most people going through a science degree will have that. Same 3 reference letters. For us, it was just a panel interview, and I remember that being one of the most fun interviews I've ever had in my life. I think it was set up in such a way that it was more just trying to get to know who you were, and not so much did you have the perfect answer for this strange question and how practiced were you. We have 2 sites. There's one in London, one in Windsor. Windsor, I think, had maybe 20 people, 20 students, and the main site had 100 and some odd, 150 some students, I believe. You want Mac, or do you want me to take Mac? Okay, sounds good. So Mac's always a bit of a strange one. So they're a 3-year program. My wife actually trained at Mac, so I sort of bug her a bit about that. 3-year program, so she accelerated all the way through pretty quick. They did have a minimum GPA of 3.0, but higher definitely does help. They tend to look at different things in the other schools, from what I can talk on, at least anecdotally. So they use that Casper test that other people have mentioned. I never ended up writing the Casper test because I didn't apply to MAC in the first place personally. And that's because they favored a particular part of the MCAT that wasn't my strongest part of the MCAT. They, again, 3 reference letters like most other schools. They sort of championed this multiple mini interview that Katie had mentioned before, where you go from room to room to room and either have a panel interview or have to work through a scenario. They have a bunch of different campuses, Hamilton being the main one, but they have offshoots in Niagara and Kitchener-Waterloo, and I have friends from all 3 sites, and all 3 sites were fantastic. I can't speak on much about the Indigenous application stream, but I do know that MAC's always been a very progressive school, and they have these types of wonderful initiatives. So if that's applicable to you, I'd encourage you to sort of look into that as well. Go on to the next one. Is this the? I don't know what this is, to be honest. This is scoring
breakdown. Yeah. So I think what McMaster put out was based on their undergraduate medical program of where everybody came from. So just showing that their undergraduate medical class of 2022, they had people who originally had an undergrad background in the arts and science, biomedical science, medical science, other people that were working, so in lab medicine or kind of pathology before, occupational therapy, a physician assistants, all different people, people with PhDs, people with just a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, some that were master's degrees in progress and they stopped them, and some that they've completed. So it just goes to show that you can apply whenever is right for you. There's no set kind of path.
You on Toronto?
I guess, yeah, just briefly. So Toronto needs a minimum of 3 years of an undergraduate degree. So again, not all medical schools need you to complete a 4-year degree. Toronto is one of them that allows you to complete 3 years. You do need that minimum GPA. You do need a minimum MCAT score. They do have a little bit more specific course prerequisites, and that's during your university. So none of them will look at your high school prerequisites or anything like that. It's all university courses. They'll ask you about little miniature essays. They'll ask you for reference letters. And they, instead of calling it a mini multi-interview, they call it this modified personal interview, where you go from room to room. So 4 stations, 12 minutes each time. It is fun, but it also is really nerve-wracking at the same time. But you know, you make the best of it. There's 2 campuses. There's downtown at kind of, they call it St. George, and there's Mississauga. And I believe there's the Black and Indigenous Student Application program, so different stream, which they were just becoming more prominent, I think, when we were entering medical school. So definitely look into that if it applies to you. The other thing is, once you're in medical school in Toronto, they have kind of this neat thing, and I think Anna and Rachel can speak to it way more than us, but that you're kind of divided into different academies. There's like Fitzy's or Fitzgerald. It's pretty interesting, but definitely if you're looking at University of Toronto for medical school, definitely I feel like they'd be comfortable if you reached out to them as well for questions. All right. So Queens is basically, they're a little bit different too. Not many people know much about Queens. They're kind of, it's a great program. We have lots of residents in our program now who graduated from Queens, but I never knew quite what Queens was looking for. But they need specific credits. They're looking at credits of university before you apply, which again, I think it's equivalent to probably a 3-year degree. I believe Queens, I don't know if they're still having the program, but there was one where as soon as you got into undergrad, it was either business or some sort of other degree program where it could be a pathway into medical school automatically. I don't know if that's still running, but something to look into if you're interested in. GPA, they only look at your last 2 years of university. There's some minimums for the MCAT, but again, they never really release it. They're kind of secretive about that. Reference letters, it's an MMI and panel interview. They're in Kingston. Kingston is a great city, great place. And they also have the military medical training program as well. If that's something you're interested in. Oh, there it is. Queen's University Accelerated Route to Medical School. So this is the program I know a little bit about, but it's a direct entry from high school. So I think you can choose your undergrad, that Bachelor of Arts. I'm pretty sure there was somebody who did within the Bachelor of Arts a business degree that I heard of from a friend of a friend, computer science, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Health Science, and then they got into the MD program as well. And it was after only 2 years of, I think, undergrad, which was good. It's a very different process. So to learn more about it, I definitely recommend you going to the Queen's website directly and looking into it. There's minimum spots per year. It's quite a lot of number of applicants from what I hear, but if it's something that you're interested in, think you'd be a great candidate, by all means, there's no harm in trying. Go for it, Adrian.
Okay, so I'm going to try and get through these last couple of slides here relatively quick because I'm seeing a lot of good questions there that I'd like to give us time to address. So Ottawa is another one that I don't have a lot of background in. It's a 2 years of undergrad to be able to apply. Minimum GPA, I guess, currently is 3.5 now. So I think they've lowered those since we ended up applying, which is I think personally a good sign. Prerequisites, like most schools, they're going to have they want you to be relatively well-rounded. The MCAT's not required, so I do remember this from back when we were applying. That was if you happen to not do well on the first MCAT or not do well on sort of subsequent ones. This is what we mean by there not being a cookie cutter way of getting into medical school. If test taking is not your strength, there are schools that don't require that test. They recognize that that's not everyone's strength, and you can still be a great doctor without testing very well. They do require the CASPER, sort of making up for the MCAT, and they have different streams. So they have the Francophone stream. They also have the Indigenous stream, which is great to see. And they have a couple other different ones that I don't think were around when Katie and I applied. Already feeling a little bit old here. So we touched on this already. The one thing I want to say is these numbers look very daunting. Even to me right now, look very daunting. Pretty much everybody that goes to medical school does get a very good line of credit. It's usually like prime minus something. There are a lot of scholarships, a lot of grants that are available, including through OSAP, and so that helps to make up the difference. And once you're a resident, you do start to make money, so you are getting to pay that down. And the other nice thing is if you go into family medicine, you can do a program where if you give so many hours each year working in an area designated as high needs, that being even Stainer and Aurelia are sort of designated as that, you get some of your OSAP forgiven. So I don't want finances to be a barrier for anyone. I come from a sort of middle-class family. Dad was a tile installer. Mom was a part-time elementary school teacher. Didn't come from money, but finances were okay for us getting through medical school, and we're doing okay now. So I know it's going to be a barrier or a potential barrier for some people, but I don't want that to sort of scare you. We can go on to the next one.
You can also work during medical school. So I worked at a few research jobs too. There was ways to do a little bit of extracurriculars and get a little bit of funding as well. So lots of opportunities.
I think this again just sort of summarizes the total cost. We'll go on to the next one here because we have that saved in the recording. That's just again the same slide we had at the very beginning, and yeah, I think we sort of touched on all of this already. I kind of want to get to the end here and leave time for these questions that are coming in still. Yeah, and I think all of these are great pieces of advice. You know, one step at a time, I think being the big one here. I'm getting overwhelmed just listening to us talk and throwing all this information at you. I think we wanted to try and get as much information here as possible so people could go back and reference it during the recording if they wanted to go back and see what we sort of chatted about. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't stress about it. There's a lot of time before these things become relevant to you, and there's a lot of resources out there to help you on the way. These are some of those resources, I guess. We'll sort of go do the questions. I don't know if Britt had a specific way of doing these in mind versus just going from the top down and answering them one at a time.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to do. Alice was able to join us as well too, so just in time for some question and answer period. So we're going to just start going through the questions. So first, I'd like to thank Anna and Rachel and Dr. Buffon and Dr. Bertram and Dr. Zhu for joining us and taking time out of their busy schedules to provide these presentations to you guys. They're very educational. Again, as Adrian said, lots of information. So we've got quite a few questions going through here, so bear with me. I'm going to scroll to the top here and see where they come through because I was not able to read any of them.
Just read off and sort of answer them, Britt, or?
Yeah, I can just read them off, or did you want to read them off? We're just gonna wing this here.
That's good. I see the question. You have the recording in the slide somewhere, Britt. Do you know where we're going to be able to access those?
Yep. So we've recorded everything. So our corporate communications department at RVH is going to upload it tomorrow to the RVH YouTube page. So hopefully within the next 24 to 48 hours, it will be available for everyone to reference as well, especially those who unfortunately were not able to participate because of the unknown count of 100 participants. So I'm sure there were more than that. We have filled the auditorium at Bear Creek before, so we've had lots of participants, which is great. Okay, so I think the first question here, if Anna, if you want to turn your camera back on, so we get everyone on the panel here.
I don't know if it's just me, but your audio is a little bit sketchy. Is anyone else?
It's a bit choppy, yeah, Brittany.
It's a little bit choppy.
Yeah.
You want to read off the questions? I don't know if any of us have any better, if anyone else has a more clear microphone maybe.
Sure, Adrian, if you want to, I'm in the basement, so that's probably why.
I had my microphone off most of the time, so it's going around here. So the first question, will they look at the difficulty of the degree when accounting for the marks? So I can say I don't believe so. I don't know if any of the other panel members have a different answer. I don't think that came into play at all. Yeah, so that's a pretty straightforward, which is why, you know, if you go to something that you like, you're probably going to get higher marks just by nature of enjoying the subject. Don't go into science if you know you don't like science but still want to be a doctor, because the chances of succeeding are going to be harder and you're probably not going to enjoy it.
The only thing I will say, sorry, Adrian, is they don't look at degrees necessarily, but they will look at a master's degree, different than just an undergrad degree for some programs. So I think U of T, if you have a thesis master, so if you finish your undergrad and then have a 2 years master's or a PhD, you are sometimes put into a slightly different pool than those who just have an undergrad. So Adrian's right, in no different degrees like a science versus an arts. There's no difference. However, a master's and a PhD can be looked at slightly differently. It's just a little bit of a higher score, I think, when the admissions committee looks at your application than those with just an undergrad. That's the only difference.
That's a great add-on there. The next question here that I have is there a French MCAT? I don't know if anyone of us has written a French MCAT. I'd be shocked if they didn't have it, especially being here in Canada, but that would be something I would check on the MCAT website. But yeah, I'd be shocked if they didn't. Are the prerequisites that were referenced pre-training or pertaining to high school or university courses? All of them, as far as I know, are university courses. I don't think high school matters at all for the university or for the med school application, apart from maybe some of the extracurricular activities and volunteer stuff that you did previously. Does anyone have anything to add to that one there? Perfect. Is there a high demand for doctors? So I think Katie touched on this. In Barrie alone, I think there's 30,000 patients that don't have a family doctor. So it is very high. I think every specialty is going to be a little bit different. You know, neurosurgery, there isn't a high demand for it just because we don't have the resources for it. There is a very, very high demand for family medicine, for psychiatry, for emergency medicine, and some of those sort of entry level in terms of those, you being the first one that the patient sees. I'm losing my words in terms of what the term is medically, but sort of the gatekeepers for the health system. Okay, the next one here. If you pass the MCAT during 3rd and 4th year of university and get accepted into the medical school after that, do you have to finish your degree? So maybe let someone else do some speaking here.
I can speak on that. So the timeline works like if you pass your MCAT, you'll need your MCAT score to do the application. The application for medical school is actually due around October, which is when you will be starting your 4th year. So yes, you do have to finish your 4th year if that's when you're applying. But let's say you are applying your 3rd year and you got in your 3rd year, do you have to finish your 4th year? If your 3rd year can still give you a full degree, you don't have to. There are some specialties, like for me, I was in health sciences and master. If I finished at 3 years, I would still get a bachelor's degree. If I finished at 4 years, I would get a bachelor's degree with honors. So I could choose either. But if you don't get a degree, if you are not able to finish a bachelor's degree, I don't think that's possible for you to go into med school.
I'll just add to that. Hi, everyone. I'm Alice. First of all, I just want to say I love how many people are there. Thanks so much for showing up. I did med school at UBC. For UBC, you don't need a degree. You can do 3 years, not have an undergraduate degree, get into medical school, and just have an MD without a Bachelor of Science.
Interesting. Okay, so the next question that I have here are all of the specialties? So I think that's representing the slide that had a bunch of them there. I didn't look through piece by piece, but I don't think that is probably super comprehensive. I think I can think of a couple that I didn't see there. And it's hard to know what all of those are, but there are a lot of websites that sort of help with that. Did anyone see any obvious ones that we missed? Anything off the top of your heads?
I'm sure there's lots, but
For sure.
You'll find the interest.
Exactly. I think Rachel already sort of addressed that a little bit here. The next one. So a lot of questions about GPA, which we would expect. So what GPA is generally looked for, what grade should you be aiming for, and as a high school student, what does it mean to be well-rounded? So I think we got a sense of what the GPAs were on the last couple of slides there. Now they were minimums, and the higher the GPA you can get, the better overall. But I think once you pass a certain point, there's a point of diminishing returns where I don't remember the exact numbers. I don't know if someone else can sort of comment. I have sort of 3.8, 3.9 in my head as being competitive, and anything above that being very good. But I don't know if anyone else can comment from their experience. Perfect. Okay. The next one here. So what countries outside of Canada can you complete med school in and then reapply to Canada? So pretty much, so most countries I think you can. We have, just speaking about our program here right now, we have one resident who I believe trained in Romania. We had another resident who just graduated who trained in the Caribbean. We have another resident actually from our year as well right now that trained out of Ireland. Australia, as I mentioned, is a very common one as well. Those are sort of the big ones that you think about, but really all over the world, as long as it's sort of recognized by Canada as a legitimate medical school or medical program, you can get in pretty much any time. We also have a student with us now who was a doctor before becoming a resident, but because they trained in a different country, had to repeat residency. And I think they were out of was it India maybe, but one of these other countries that have great medical systems.
Just to add on to that one, just so you know, if you do end up applying to the States and going to medical school there are a few programs, I believe out of Michigan, some of the universities, and I think the University of Washington, that if you are applying back to residency, so there's always loopholes, they will look at you as if you are a Canadian graduated medical student. So there are some programs affiliated with the US that if you're interested in applying abroad and out of country, they look at you when you're coming back, just like any other Canadian medical student. So double check which ones, but I believe it's Michigan or Detroit, and then Washington, I think.
I think just to add a little bit more there, it's important to note too that if you are going to medical school abroad and you are a Canadian citizen, you do have to apply as an international medical graduate. So you're applying to a different stream rather than a Canadian medical graduate. So there are more limited spots for IMGs to come back and complete residency here. So I think that's important to note too, that when you're considering different places to go to medical school, that could potentially be a barrier to coming back and train in Canada. That being said, doesn't mean that, if you do your training abroad, you can do your residency abroad, that you can't come back and practice independently in Canada. There are just a few more licensing restrictions and those types of things that you need to make sure that you consider as well too. Not to scare you away from doing it, but just to know that there are a few extra steps when training abroad to come back to Canada.
Perfect. So next question I have again about GPA, what would a 3.87 GPA look like on a percentage mark? So the way I always went back to this, because I think Katie was mentioning this before, every school has a different system. Like McMaster, when I trained there, had a 12 grade system, and you had to convert that back to a GPA, and there were different percentages with that. I think the OHMSA website, or the OHMSA website, has a good breakdown of what each school's grading system is like and how that translates into grades and things like that. So I would look there for a more accurate idea of what a 3.87 looks like percentage-wise. I don't know off the top of my head if anyone has a ballpark answer. I would say definitely above 80, but I don't know for sure what the exact value is.
I had some general things below in the text answer.
Perfect. Sounds good. The next one here, I think we'll get some people in on this one. As a grade 10 student, very passionate in bio, what are things you can do to set yourself up for success early on? Maybe let someone else, so I'm not hogging all the questions here, let someone else maybe speak on this one.
I think the best thing you can do is to explore, talk to doctors, like shadow them, see if this is actually something you want to do. It will really help you when you know about more than just what's shown on TV when you go into medical school. Like it's not like Grey's Anatomy or like House MD at all. There are lots of things that they don't show on TV that I think you would want to know about before you make the decision. And if you show that you've seen and you've experienced these different field or different aspects of medicine, it'll make you a much stronger candidate because it shows that, you know, you're not coming to medical school because you watched Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. The other thing that I would add as well is outside of medicine, find something that you're passionate about. I think we've talked on this a couple of times, because not only is that going to make you a more interesting person to interview when you do go through interviews, and a more interesting person, you're going to have more interesting answers for your autobiographical sketches. It's also going to be better for your mental health overall. So for me, it was always sports. I did sports all throughout high school, all throughout undergrad, still doing them now in residency, and that's always been an outlet for me. And that's, I think, addressing one of the questions that comes later. How do you deal with the stress? Finding something that you're passionate in and making sure you stick to that throughout all of the studying and all the hardships that education can bring to you. So I think Rachel answered a good question there. About what countries outside of Canada can use. There's the World Directory of Medical Schools, which I didn't know about. Is it in clerkship where you choose your specialty? So technically, yes. At the end of clerkship, which is usually your fourth year in a four-year program, you apply through something called CARMS, which is where you decide which program you want to apply to or what specialty you want to apply to. So you're technically at the end of, I guess fourth year is not technically clerkship, but at the end of those, the beginning of the fourth year is where you decide sort of what programs you want to apply to. We talked about where you can find the recording of this. It's on the RVH YouTube, and Rachel answered the question about the GPAs there. Perfect. No, there's some hard numbers there as well. Fantastic. Is this the application requirement to get into medical school? So I think that was probably when Katie and I were chatting about the at the very end there. I believe it was on those slides, but correct us if I'm wrong. Those were, I believe those were the requirements to get into medical school rather than medical school into residency. So yes, have a look at those. You can find those again on the OHMSA website or by going to each school's program, especially for more updated stuff. If most people here are in high school, things might change 2, 3, 4 years down the road when you end up applying. So you want to sort of stay up to date. Another good resource, I actually didn't think about this until recently. I haven't looked at this book in a long time. I got it out of Mac. So for anyone applying there was a, not sure how well that's coming through there, but it's a book that sort of summarizes all of that in a text format. Maybe we'll just hand these out for free, and I found that very helpful in the years that I was applying. But all that information is on OHMSA as well. Okay, good. Is organic chemistry still a prerequisite course for medical school? For some schools, yes. I don't know about every single one. I think we sort of went through some of those requirements. So does anyone remember specifically whether the dreaded Orgo was on their thing? I think we might.
I also answered this briefly in text, but basically, I think for the schools I applied to, they required Orgos. Some of them, or one of them, I was able to substitute my general chemistry or some other thing that was not Orgo for the science requirements. They're different for each medical school.
Like double check the websites, because this changes from year to year. Like when I was applying, it was required, and then I think UBC changed their thing. You don't even need to have like any prerequisite at one point, but double check. Like don't just listen to us. Go onto websites, do your own research, I think.
So next one here, we talked about this already as well, but do you need to go into medical school for medical research or lab work? And I think it was either Anna or Rachel answer this below. You definitely don't. And I would say most of the research done in the world is actually done by non-MDs, or at least a lot of the non-clinical work. The alternative route is going to graduate school and becoming a doctor or professor of research in that sort of way. So that would be, you do your 4 years of undergrad, you apply for either a master's or a PhD, and you do research and like that. And when you come out of there, you're a doctor, different kind of doctor. You don't have an MD, you have a PhD, and that allows you to do research. But that's a whole other topic, and I don't think any of us are experts in that sort of field. But definitely very, very rewarding career. And is the next question here, is the application process similar from medicine to dental school? I don't know if anyone can comment on that.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Instead of writing the MCAT, you write something, I believe it's called the DAT or something, but it's very similar to it's the DAT. Good. It's a lot of more like visual spatial testing that they do on the DAT, which is really cool. Also really interesting, but very similar process, exactly the same.
I think one of the schools made you carve soap into some shape, or at least that's the rumor I heard. That's about the extent that I know about it. So it's a lot of fun to be practice carving your soap, if that's what you're interested in. Yeah, very, another great career option. What was that, Alice?
I was just going to clarify, so it's for some reason, the two institutions are entirely different. If you go for a dentist, if you want to be a dentist, you go to dentistry school, and then you want to be a doctor for any other systems, you go to medical school. So entirely different schools. I got confused when I was young, so.
Right, the next one here, each year when I need to reapply and get reaccepted into the university or medical school, I'm hypothetically going to. So I think I understand what this question is going at. So you only need to get accepted to a program once, both for undergrad and for medical school. So for undergrad, whatever program you get into after high school, once you're accepted, you're there for 3 or 4 years, assuming you keep up with the academic requirements. Same thing with medical school. Once you're in, you still have to keep up a certain grade and keep meeting the requirements that way, but you don't have to reapply every single year. Thankfully, because that would be a nightmare. Yeah, so hopefully once for each. And then, yeah, Rachel answered that question already, and that one as well with the Orgo. Do you know?
Yeah. Next one is, do you know if Simcoe County residents get into NOSM? So being a pre-Simcoe County resident, you can get into NOSM, but you are not considered part of the northern cutoff for their school. So part of it is kind of when you're applying to medical school and you're applying to NOSM, they'll ask you where you went to high school and where you were living kind of throughout high school. And if you're not part of their catchment, they won't consider you kind of a northern applicant, which can give you a couple more kind of scores to your overall application. But people will still get into the NOSM program. You just won't go get that extra kind of bonus point. The same thing as if you're from Southwestern Ontario and applying to Western, you get bonus points as well for being in their catchment zone.
Perfect. Next one here, there are any ways of getting volunteer experience in hospitals or healthcare while in high school during COVID? That's a tough one. I don't know if anyone's had any experience themselves. I doubt it. Maybe Britt, looks like you're coming on there.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. Unfortunately, due to all the COVID restrictions, technically, if someone was to come in for an observership, it is a program that Medical Affairs does offer, where you can shadow a physician throughout the center. Technically, you're a volunteer when you're coming to do an observership, and unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions, we are unable to have volunteers in this the health center at this time. We're hoping by the end of March, beginning of April, that we will be able to welcome back our volunteers at the hospital, which would mean we would be able to start up the observership program. So keep checking back. You can look on the Barrie Area Physician Recruitment website or on the RBH website. Contact information is on both of those. So you can always check in to see if we've been able to start that program again sooner than we had hoped. But there's also opportunities to do it in the community as well too. There aren't restrictions in practices in the community. They're specifically just restrictions at RBH right now.
Also, just wanted to add on, it depends on why you want to do the volunteering. If you're specifically, you want to be in the hospital and see how it works, then like Brittany said, there currently isn't much opportunity for that. But if you want to volunteer because you want to get to know patients, you want to help people, then there are opportunities. There's lots of virtual volunteer opportunities available. I know I was leading like a virtual music group that's making YouTube videos for patients so they can see them in the hospital. There's also a senior isolation prevention program where you call you call seniors in the community like once a week or however many times you want. And you just make sure that they have someone to talk to, that everything's okay for them. You check up on them regularly, and that's a very valuable role that you can play in someone's life, because seniors, they don't get out of the house often, they don't talk to people. Similarly, lots of other volunteer opportunities over the internet that you can do.
Perfect. Now, I'm gonna unfortunately have to get going myself. I've seen a lot of great questions here. I'd love to stick around, but sort of that work-life balance. I've got a soccer game I gotta get to, so maybe get someone else to read some of these questions out. Just one for Dr. Darvesh there. I saw him his question. Yeah, in case you missed it before, the slides and the video is going to be on the YouTube channel at RVH there. So if they're interested in looking at that, that'd be the place to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much for participating, Dr. Buffon, and good luck in your soccer game.
Look.
Thank you, guys. I just want to say this was a very amazing presentation, and I'm sure this is very valuable for those that are interested in becoming a doctor. For those that don't know me, I'm actually a geriatrician here in the area, and it's an amazing and a very rewarding and a lovely career. So I hope you guys go for it, and hopefully you'll become our young colleagues in the future, and maybe some of you will be taking care of us. But thank you for this presentation. Hopefully you guys will have more sessions like this.
Thank you, Dr. Darvish.
Do you want me to read the questions aloud, and then Alice, Rachel, Anna, Britt?
Sure. Yeah, there's still quite a few questions on here. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we'll go for maybe another 5-10 minutes.
We'll try and
questions. People can email me as well too, and I can field the questions that way as well. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Perfect. We'll try and we've already answered them. Perfect. Rachel, you're doing a phenomenal job of answering them in the chat. So if I see that you've already answered them, I'll just move on.
Yeah, we can also like make a Google Doc with the residue questions, and then we can answer them in a Google Doc if you want.
Perfect. So we did that one. So now on to, is it possible to work during your undergraduate or medical school, and can working during your undergraduate course or medical school affect your grades? I technically worked during medical school, I guess. So I had a research position. I was just fortunate enough that there was a grant associated with my research position. So I had three different research positions, all with a very variable amounts of funding throughout medical school, and it was manageable. You learn really quickly throughout your undergrad and even in high school about multitasking if you're in a sports, if you're doing lots of extracurricular activities. So if you need to make it work, you can make it work. And usually if you are one of those people that sometimes the grades might be affected a little bit, but if you are motivated and passionate, you can work around that and still come out where you want to. Any strategies you use to cope for stress? So anybody want to just rhyme off one or two maybe?
There's a great app called Headspace. It is free mostly, helpful for meditation. I like to do some yoga. Adrian talked about sports, but also it's just knowing that, like you can't do everything in the world all at once. So it just prioritize. I don't know if you've all seen the chart of, kind of time management, categorizing what is urgent, what is important, what is non-urgent but important, what is, urgent but not important. So things like that. So I think a lot of strategies. I'm sure there are books out there. I've heard of 7 strategies for effective people. I think that's one. And then like Atomic Habits. These are all great books to read, but I think that can be a whole nother hour answering that one question. But great question.
Dance parties work too. Okay, so is co-op useful for medical school? I would say, yeah, Alice, take it.
I think any like experience will be useful for medical school if it adds to your CV. I've always sort of approached it by thinking that, like dreams give you dreams give you direction, not necessarily destination, right? So if you always choose something, whether it be co-op, another degree, or work experience that help you to, you know, be passionate about what you do and be happy, then no matter where you end up, you're always going to be happy. So the answer is yes, but not like you don't need to have a co-op experience.
The next one is, are there any apprenticeships? And I think, Britt, you already talked about this with RVH, that we're not doing any right now, but hopefully in the future, kind of March, they'll do that. Do schools account for lower marks in harder undergraduate programs? We already answered that one. So we also already answered, what is your YouTube channel called? It's the RVH, right? Yeah. What are some study habits that helped you get through university? Rachel, Alice?
I have to say I procrastinated a lot during university. I find that I work better under stress. So I apply that to myself. But I would also recommend not to cram for your exams. Try to set up a study schedule that works for you. Like if you like studying alone, if you like studying with a group, figure that out early on so that you can use that to your advantage. It doesn't hurt to take some time to figure out what's best for you and try different methods before the final exams come through.
I can answer the next one. So does U of T not look at a one-year master's? So I personally had a one-year master's. Technically, the answer is no, they do not accept it as a master's. However, if your one-year master's has a lot of research component, you can get your supervisor to write you a letter on your behalf to try and put you in the master's category. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What about gastroenterology? It is totally a specialty. It is the specialty from gum to bum. It is a wonderful specialty. If you're interested in it, definitely kind of look it up. They do a lot of scopes and things, but I don't think we have time to go into all the details of gastroenterology tonight. What resources did you guys use to study for the MCAT? I used practice questions. I used a lot of the resource books, any of the ones you can find in Chapters or Indigo. Anybody else?
It was just the books for me, the Princeton something books.
Yeah, awesome. And just a comment about the Canada-wide shortage for family med and mental health doctors. Absolutely. As a grade 10 student who wants to become a pediatric surgeon, do you have any tips on that? Follow your dreams. You know, you'll be able to do it if you put your mind to it. As a grade 10 student who wants to become a gastroenterologist or cardiologist, do you have any tips on that? One day at a time. Anybody else?
Yes, shadow.
Start on this. When I was grade 10, I did not know what I wanted to do in life. So the fact that you're thinking about it is like a very good sign already. Just do what you want to do.
Yeah, Rachel, tips on getting into health sci at Mac.
Sorry, when I got into health sci, I didn't know how and why I got into health sci. So it was that feeling for the entire 4 years I was there. I unfortunately cannot help you that much.
Are there a lot of Mac Health Sci students in your class? There are lots of Mac Health Sci students across Ontario that get into medical school. It is a great pre-program to medical school. I think I was not a part of it. With that said, not everybody can get into health sci. There is many different programs, and if you don't get into it, you will succeed no matter what. Speaking from experience. Are there any strategies on how to memorize and remember all the material in medical school? Practice makes perfect. Time and energy will get there. Yeah.
Because you don't need to remember all materials, but you have to know what resources to look up. Because so medical knowledge doubles every 6 days. There's no way that you can remember it all, but still do the stuff in your courses. And then I think for like all the materials, know where to look.
What has been your favorite part of the journey to becoming a doctor? We'll get one person to answer this because we could go on for age and age. Me? Okay, I guess it falls to me. Honestly, it's the interactions with the patients. Small things make a huge difference and impact, especially with the FMTU affiliate with RVH, working with at-risk youth. Again, small things, like just taking time out of your day to help somebody else is hugely rewarding. And my favorite part, being a grade 10 student, it has been hard to have extracurricular and volunteering during the pandemic. Totally feel that that's okay. Will it affect your chances? And I mentioned that they look at extracurriculars up to age 16. I believe it's 16, it might be grade 10, but they definitely do look it up into kind of pre-pandemic as well and post-pandemic. So if you don't have opportunities now, everybody's taking the pandemic into consideration in the future. And if on that note, if something happened to you where you couldn't volunteer or you couldn't do extracurriculars, some applications will actually give you an extra essay or paragraph to write if you need to explain some circumstances around either your grades or gaps in your learning. Do you think a 3-year general science degree is good to get into medical school? Yes. Or does it have to be a 4 years of undergrad? Either is great. Is the short answer. Are there any courses that you would recommend to join medical school or increase your chance? Whatever's going to make you happy is the short answer, whatever you're interested in. Are you allowed to take the MCAT and then take a gap year? Absolutely. Even if you are happy with your score, 100% take time off, explore. Do you think general science undergrad is a good undergrad degree to do in order to get into medical school? If you're interested in it, yes. Do you think getting a master's degree after an undergrad boosts a high chance of getting into medical school? No, not necessarily. Do what you're interested in too. Anybody else want to comment?
I think sometimes people use it as a way to rescue poor marks when you are in undergrad. So if you failed a couple of courses or you in general have not reached a good enough GPA, as we mentioned earlier, when you get a master's degree or a PhD degree, they do kind of look at your marks in a different light. So in that sense, it could help.
Awesome. And I believe we are almost to the end, guys. What age do you need to be to volunteer at a hospital, and what qualifications do you need? Britt, I feel like this one's for you.
So you have to be 16 to work at the hospital. In order to apply for a volunteer position. And then just what you're interested in depends on where they're going to place you. And I know everyone wants, the big high traffic areas like emerge and those types of things. Just know that you might not always get emerge, but there's tons of different interesting areas in the hospital. So it's getting your foot in the door, trying a different department and then moving on to emerge when there is a space, because there are only a certain number of positions within each department based on what the needs of that department are. And then there's one more question here. Are any shows and movies that are like med school?
I don't know, to be honest.
I think, yeah, Scrubs is what I've heard is more accurate.
I worked with the Dr. House, but it wasn't Dr. House, the Dr. House, but still very cool.
All right, and there's just one last question. So does it matter if you take a 3-year or 4-year undergrad degree to go to medical school? So the group did already answer that. So I think that's all the questions. Good job, team. You made it through all the questions. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you so much. Dr. Bertram, Dr. Zhu, Rachel and Anna, and Dr. Buffon for participating tonight. It's always a well-attended event, and we'll see if we can do some more in the future, hopefully in person, but it will be recorded, and we will also post it on the Team RVH YouTube website. So thank you very much for everyone for coming, and we hope you have a great night.